If I asked you what makes a great leader, a CEO, a founder, maybe a community organizer, you'd probably say vision.
Almost always.
But what if that vision isn't some uh, magical talent or just raw charisma? What if it's more like a routine?
Well, that's the really stunning idea running through all our sources today. They argue pretty strongly that vision is actually a practical discipline.
A discipline, like something you practice.
Exactly, something you have to train, protect, sharpen daily, just like any other skill you need for high performance.
Okay, so that's what we're diving into today then. The mechanisms that separate a leader who just reacts from one who's genuinely proactive.
Yeah, we're looking at how to move from that default risk perspective,
Yeah.
the thing that kind of freezes us up, to a cultivated promise perspective.
It sounds pretty grand, promise perspective, but you're saying it boils down to small habits.
It really does. Micro habits. Because here's the irony we see over and over again. Leaders confuse being incredibly busy with having actual direction.
Right, mistaking motion for momentum. I see that.
Exactly. If your calendar is packed but there's no real clarity behind it, well, you're just busy. You're not necessarily visionary.
So our mission today is to find those quiet habits, that vision training plan maybe, the stuff that lets you keep your sight clear when everyone else is kind of lost in the fog.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to get at that core question. How can two leaders look at the exact same volatile situation, same market data, same crisis, and one sees a total dead end while the other sees, I don't know, a doorway?
And the answer isn't usually about the facts themselves. It's the interpretation. It comes down to disciplined vision.
Okay, let's unpack that default setting first. Because, wow, the sources are pretty blunt here. They basically say our natural way of seeing things, if we don't manage it, is fundamentally broken.
Oh, sure.
Short-sighted.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why we struggle so much to see possibilities when we're under pressure.
It is, yeah. Our default settings, you could say, are kind of calibrated for self-preservation, not really for potential. We found 3 specific elements the sources keep highlighting that define this broken default vision.
Okay, lay the first one on us.
So the first one is what we can call the scarcity default. Basically, we default to fear and lack instead of provision and trust.
The scarcity default.
Yeah, psychologically, it's just that human tendency to fixate way more on potential losses than potential gains. And in a faith context, the sources trace this right back to the Eden echo.
Eden echo.
That moment where the focus shifts to what's missing, what's restricted, instead of all the abundance that's actually there. When leaders operate from that place, that scarcity mindset, their decisions just default to fear.
And they hide from risks.
They hide from the bold, necessary risks, yeah. They end up leading reactively, not creatively.
Okay, so we're kind of wired to spot the gap, the deficit, not the resource that might be there. That feels true.
Is.
And that hyper-focus on the immediate threat, that must lead into the second element you mentioned.
It does, perfectly.
Yeah.
It's the tyranny of the immediate. Pure short-sightedness.
Tyranny of the immediate.
Yeah, you become completely overwhelmed by whatever's screaming the loudest right now. You know, the urgent deadline, that angry client email, the quarterly numbers that look, uh-oh, not so good.
Yeah, the fires you have to put out.
Right. The immediate concern is always louder, always feels more real than the long-term purpose, and it just completely hijacks strategic vision.
Okay, so you take that immediate fear, and then you combine it with what other people are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets you to the third thing, the most destructive one.
Exactly. Contagious groupthink. Or a term the sources often use, the grasshopper syndrome.
Grasshopper syndrome, okay.
This is such a devastating breakdown in perspective. The sources point to that famous story from the Hebrew Bible, number 13. A group of spies goes to check out the promised land.
Right. The spies.
10 of them come back with a report that was, look, 100% factually correct. The cities were fortified. The people living there were huge, like giants. The facts were undeniable.
Okay.
But they let those immediate scary facts completely overshadow the ultimate long-term promise they'd been given.
So they weren't lying. They were just interpreting the facts through fear.
Exactly right. Their conclusion was just disastrous. We are not able. And notice how the fear twists everything. First, they see the risk, the giants.
Mm-hmm.
That immediately distorts their own identity. We seem to ourselves like grasshoppers.
Mm-hmm.
Then they project that fear onto the enemy, and so we seemed to them.
Wow.
They weren't just reporting facts anymore. They were spreading this paralyzing emotion, and it caused panic across an entire nation.
That's the crucial difference then. The risk report is always the loudest voice in the room. Fear shouts, faith, or maybe true vision, it just whispers.
It absolutely whispers.
And it takes real discipline, doesn't it? to actually hear that whisper over the shouting?
It requires consistency, not volume, but consistency.
Which brings us perfectly into the training plan, right? If our default setting is all risk and short-sightedness, we need an intentional routine, a set of maybe non-negotiable disciplines to install a new way of seeing.
A new operating system, yeah. One that aligns our sight with, well, with truth, or at least a bigger
We
reality.
need to get out of reaction mode and into training mode.
Exactly. Leave the analytical battlefield, enter the, let's say, the vision gymnasium. The sources outline 4 disciplines that are really interconnected. They consistently build that muscle of spiritual and strategic sight.
Okay, let's walk through them. Discipline 1, alignment. The sources might call this prayer, but for maybe a corporate leader, it's more like establishing the North Star.
Absolutely. The core function is alignment, not just asking for stuff. It's not a cosmic vending machine where you put in a problem and ask for a fix.
Right.
It shifts the whole conversation. Instead of asking God, how do I fix my problem, or how do I solve this, the visionary question becomes something like, what's the highest truth or perspective available to me on this problem?
So when the problem feels overwhelming, the leader needs to kind of zoom out, get altitude.
Precisely. Think about that famous story of Elisha's servant. He sees this massive enemy army surrounding them and he panics. Understandably. Elisha doesn't lecture him, though. He just prays, open his eyes that he may see. Not, make the army disappear, but see the reality that was already there. The protective force, the chariots of fire.
Seeing what's really there.
Yes. So the practical tool here is the open my eyes practice. Whether that's spiritual for you or secular, it's about committing daily time to seek a perspective that's higher than your immediate fear.
Okay, so alignment is seeing up. Discipline 2 is processing. The sources call this reflection, seeing inward and through.
You just cannot lead strategically if you're constantly reacting, right? Processing requires solitude. It needs quiet.
Which feels countercultural.
Totally. But in that quiet, you can actually start to distinguish the signal of truth from all the noise of fear. When you see figures like Jesus or Moses withdrawing, they weren't escaping responsibility.
They were working.
They were processing the world through a corrective lens. They were deciding what information to internalize and what to just discard as noise.
We often mistake solitude for inefficiency in the modern workplace, don't we? But if you're always rushed, you literally can't think strategically.
You can't. So the tool here is the vision journal. And look, this isn't a diary about your feelings.
Okay.
You use it specifically to test your own assumptions. You ask yourself hard questions like, what core assumptions am I making right now about my team, my competitor, the market that might be limiting my perspective? Or which fears am I currently accepting as if they're established facts?
It's about using quiet time for some cognitive correction.
That's a great way to put it. Cognitive corrective action.
Okay, so we've got internal clarity covered with alignment and processing. But we all have blind spots, right? We can't see everything ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So discipline 3 is perspective, which means mentorship seeing outward. We need to borrow eyes sometimes.
Oh, this is critical. And the sources are brilliant here. They define 2 specific types of advisors you really need.
2 types, okay.
First is a veteran mentor. Think of the Elisha figure we mentioned. They're ahead of you on the path. They provide perspective.
They've seen it before.
Exactly. They've navigated recessions or market crashes or whatever your giant is. So when the army surrounds your camp, they don't panic like the servant did. They know about those invisible resources, those chariots of fire.
Okay, the veteran mentor.
Yeah.
And the second type.
The second is the Caleb colleague, maybe the challenger. They're with you, often right there in the trenches. They provide courage.
Courage. Interesting. How?
Well, they see the exact same giants you do. The same scary facts, the same risks, but they're the ones who insist, hey, we can certainly do this, because their confidence isn't just based on the size of the risk, it's rooted in the promise of success or the mission or the shared goal.
You need both then. Perspective from above and courage from alongside.
You absolutely need both to maintain that disciplined vision, especially under pressure.
All right, finally, discipline 4, foresight, which the sources link to learning, seeing forward and around. So vision isn't just like a mystical download. It needs intelligence, too.
Definitely. Vision grows through what you might call spirit-led curiosity, but it has to be combined with actual intelligence gathering. The sources bring up the sons of Issachar.
Oh, yes, the Issachar example.
This group, they say, understood the times and knew what Israel should do. They weren't just sitting around waiting for divine instructions. They were, in effect, strategic analysts. They studied trends, context. the environment.
So how does a modern leader apply that? It sounds like read widely, read outside your field.
That's basically the Issachar habit. You deliberately commit to regularly studying topics outside your immediate operational field. History, economics, maybe art, new technology, biology, whatever.
Okay.
And then you force yourself to ask the connecting question, is there a universal principle here that applies to my leadership? Or how does this seemingly unrelated data point inform my strategy?
It pulls you out of your silo.
Drastically. It expands your horizon beyond just your day-to-day expertise. It helps you become more of a pattern recognizer, not just a reactive problem solver.
Okay, those 4 disciplines, alignment, processing, perspective, foresight, that sounds like a really solid infrastructure for vision. But I gotta ask, where do leaders tend to fail with this? Even if they, try to practice these things.
Well, a big one is what we can call the charisma trap.
The charisma trap. How does that work?
Charisma is purely an amplifier. That's all it is. So if your underlying vision of the thing being amplified is rooted in your ego, or maybe back in that default scarcity mindset we talked about, then charisma just helps you build a bigger monument to yourself. It might look impressive for a while, but it's ultimately unsustainable. Think King Saul, maybe.
Right.
But if your vision is genuinely rooted in disciplined promise, in something bigger than yourself, then charisma helps build a movement, something lasting.
So true vision is sustained by the quiet discipline, not the loud personality.
Exactly. The personality might burn out or falter, but the discipline endures.
And what about the most common pushback? Especially for reflection and alignment, those quieter ones, it's always the "I'm too busy" objection. I hear that constantly.
Oh yeah, it's the classic false choice, isn't it? The discipline deficit. Leaders argue, I'm too busy putting out fires to spend 30 minutes praying or reflecting or reading history.
Yeah, I don't have time not to be working.
Right. But the sources are really unequivocal here. These disciplines are not extra tasks on your to-do list. They are the actual foundation of effective decision-making.
So neglecting them doesn't save time.
It guarantees you'll waste more time later.
Yeah.
It leads directly to hurried, short-sighted decisions, which then cause burnout, rework, decision paralysis. It's a vicious cycle. Look, if the most effective leaders in history consistently carved out solitude, the rest of us probably need it too.
Okay, let's tackle the really practical objection. For the, secular, pragmatic leader listening, some of this might sound a bit like spiritualized denial. Are we just saying ignore the tough facts?
That's such a critical point, and the answer is absolutely not. Vision training is not denial. It doesn't pretend the facts aren't real.
The giants are real.
The giants are real, the budget is tight, the market is volatile, the competitors are strong. Vision training doesn't deny those facts. It trains you to interpret those facts through a higher, more complete perspective, a perspective of opportunity or resilience or ultimate truth, depending on your framework.
So you validate the risk report.
You have to. But then you intentionally pivot to finding and building the promise report.
We see that pivot perfectly in that David and Goliath story, don't we? Everyone else saw this impossible, terrifying risk. David saw, something different.
He saw a target. And why? David ran toward the giant because his eyes were already trained. They were trained by smaller, past victories fighting the lion and the bear, as the story goes.
He'd practiced.
He'd practiced his own version of reflection, maybe, and seen evidence of success. So when he faced Goliath, his focus wasn't primarily on the size of the giant. It was on the size of his God, or his conviction, or his past track record. For David, the giant wasn't just a threat. It actually became a resource, an opportunity to demonstrate something bigger.
That's the ultimate payoff, isn't it? Seeing the opportunity within the obstacle.
That's disciplined vision in action.
So for you listening right now, maybe facing a massive decision, there's a practical tool we can use from this. The sources suggest something called the giants and grapes exercise.
Yes, this is a great way to physically force that pivot in perspective we've been talking about. Take any high-stakes decision you're wrestling with. Get a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle.
Okay, 2 columns.
2 columns. First column, list all the visible, quantifiable facts and fears. These are your giants. This is your current risk report. Be honest. Get it all down.
All the scary stuff.
All the scary stuff. Then, second column. List all the corresponding evidence of past faithfulness, available resources, strategic promises, past wins, reasons for hope. These are your grapes. This is your promise report.
Grapes like the fruit the spies brought back.
Exactly. The evidence of the land's goodness that got overshadowed by the giants.
Okay, giants and grapes. And what's the rule for using this?
The absolute rule is this. You are not allowed to make the decision until your grapes column, your promise report, objectively outweighs your giants column, your risk report.
Objectively outweighs. So you really have to work on that grapes column.
You do. It forces you out of that purely emotional, reactive state dominated by the giants column. It pushes you into an aligned, strategic position where you have actively searched for and articulated the higher perspective, the reasons for confidence before you act.
Okay, so let's bring this home. What does this all mean for you, the listener, the learner? It sounds like leadership isn't about waiting for some lightning bolt of vision.
Not at all. It's about the consistent, sometimes mundane, cultivation of disciplined vision. It happens through those 4 pillars we discussed: alignment, processing, perspective, and foresight.
We live in a world just saturated with risk reports, don't we? Every news alert, every internal memo, it's always screaming about the current giant.
Constantly. So your calling, if you want to be a disciplined leader, is to become a carrier of the courageous promise report. To be the person in the room who acknowledges the complexity, yes, but insists on leading towards a more complete, more resourceful reality.
The final word from our sources feels pretty urgent here. It suggests the greatest danger in leadership isn't actually making a mistake when you try to discern vision.
No, the greatest danger is in not making the disciplined effort to discern at all, because that guarantees your vision will be diminished or distorted or maybe completely lost over time.
So think back to that image from Elisha's story one last time. If you were surrounded by that enemy army right now, what would your default untrained vision see?
Only the risk. Only the swords and shields.
But your trained eyes, the ones you've started disciplining this week, maybe even just by listening to this, what could they see?
They could potentially see the deeper reality of the situation, the mountain full of horses and chariots of fire all around, the unseen resources, the bigger picture.
And that journey to see those invisible truths, it starts right now, doesn't it? With a simple choice.
Just a choice. To begin training your eyes today.